minute, let a few other people into from the waiting room and into this main room, and then we will get going. As a reminder, if everybody can mute themselves to start, that would be appreciated. As once we get going, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask a question. But otherwise, please hit the mute button. Let's see if we have anybody else in the waiting room. Okay, I think we can probably get going. So thank you to all students who have joined today. I'm really excited that we have Matt Youngquist here to give a workshop talk on resumes and kind of some of the things that go into building an effective resume, which is really good timing because next week we have our Business and Engineering Career Fair on October 8th. You students, you can certainly start signing up for slots on Handshake, and having a good resume is a big part of being, having a successful career fair. So Matt's going to talk to you about, what really makes a good resume. So that being said, I will turn it over to Matt.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Justin. Thanks for the invite to come share some virtual advice. I think I've come up there to the school a number of times in the past, talked about LinkedIn and some of that, but resumes have been around longer, and resumes for many job hunters or soon-to-be graduates are, such a source of frustration. So I'm going to do my best here in the next 50 minutes or so to share what I've seen. I've been writing these things for about 25 years now, if you can believe it. Fell into this field right out of college myself, and now I'm a career coach over in Bellevue. I do resume writing, job search coaching, stuff like that. But having been around this industry forever, I think it's just something almost every job hunter agonizes about and wonders, is my piece good enough? So I'm going to share what I think are the tips, and I think it'll be easiest, within reason. Feel free to either just unmute yourselves and ask questions if you have questions, or I have my chat box going. If you want to type them in there, I'll kind of monitor that. And last but not least, I've got some pretty, I think, thorough slides, so I'll be distributing those to Justin to, you'll have access to them one way or another when we're done. So let's go ahead and get started. I always like to say, why is resume writing for most people such a frustrating exercise? Well, when you pick it apart, there's a couple reasons. Everybody's an expert. If you ask 10 people, you will hear 10 different things about resumes. I have written resumes that I have simultaneously had clients tell me someone said was the best resume they've ever seen and the worst resume they've ever seen. So it's hard because people, I think, go out there expecting consensus. Like, 5 out of 5 people will think it's great. That almost never happens because, again, it's a very subjective document. Just like not everyone can agree on a good piece of music or, a good book or a good movie. I mean, there's different tastes. It's also hard for a lot of people because it feels like bragging. I mean, a lot of people write resumes, just get uncomfortable saying really, nice things about themselves or taking credit for what they've done. Now, there's a line you don't want to come across. You don't want to be arrogant. You don't want to take credit for things you haven't done. But I meet a lot of people who are almost too much on the humble end and just not selling themselves enough on resumes. So for some people, that's kind of the barrier, is just, I hate talking about my whole self. I hate selling myself. Another thing, maybe not as much if a lot of this group is younger, but as you get many years into your career, it's hard to remember, what did I get done 17 years ago? Or what were the details? So that can be a barrier. I hate to say it, but in my industry, a lot of companies that do resumes, especially like the national ones and the web-based ones, they're in the fear-mongering business. I don't care what you send them. They're going to tell you it stinks and you blew it and you'll never work again and you got to pay them $800 to fix it. So keep your guard up. It's a very unregulated industry. And again, not that there's not some good high-integrity resume writers, but I've had people with very good resumes send theirs in online for free evaluations. And I don't think I've seen one yet that came back and said, oh, your resume is pretty good. Yeah, you don't need to pay us anything. They know exactly the buttons to push to make people constantly think their resume isn't good enough. Okay. And then the final thing I would say as we kind of dive in here is, it sounds like I'm contradicting myself, but resumes are important and you want to have the best one you can. In the big picture of getting a job, though, what I would just promise you is resumes are not nearly as important as what you do with the resume. So in other words, a lot of people, when their job hunt doesn't go well, they say there must be something wrong with my resume. And sometimes they're right, but many other times when I talked about what are you doing with it? How many are you sending out? How are you networking? How many recruiters are you talking to? It turns out they're just not doing nearly enough as far as getting the word out and playing the numbers game. They're just relying on that document to do everything for them. So that's much more common. Get your resume as good as you can make it, but really focus on outreach, really focus on relationships and reaching out to companies directly and just getting a lot of stuff out there. That's going to be more important in the big scheme of things. Okay. But yeah, to kind of wrap up here, very few people I meet enjoy writing resumes. In fact, if I found some, I could probably send some work to them because I get a lot of requests and I can't find many people who like to do it. Another interesting point that sounds a little weird from a resume writer is most of a resume's effectiveness is not something you can change or I can change. So a lot of resume articles and books will have you believe it's all subject to manipulation. It's all about the cosmetics and the format and the font. When studies have been done on this, like this one on the screen here, what they almost all show is that recruiters and employers, their eyes go right to the facts. What titles have you held? What companies, if any, have you worked with? What's your education? You see the like red spots on this heat map? That's where their eyes are going when they scan resumes. So what that's kind of telling us is all this stuff people agonize about, the summary at the top or the format, that's secondary. What companies really want to know are the facts. And for better or worse, your facts matter. If you have a degree relevant to your field, that's great. If you've worked in a few jobs or internships relevant, that's great. But people who haven't got any work experience or have changed jobs many, many times in a short period of time, that's the stuff that really does make a difference. So it's funny to me in all the articles and literature about resumes, I never see someone say, hey, everybody, everything you're fighting about is about 20% of it. The 80% of it is, have you made good choices and have you built good experience? So don't fall into that trap. Companies care most about the facts, okay? All right, so now as I start telling you what we can change on a resume, and I'm going to be showing you some slides and also, of course, jumping to some actual resumes and showing you these things in practice. I would argue, and this is again after 25 years of writing these, there are 5 key rules to a good resume. There are 5 things almost everyone agrees on if you talk to employers and recruiters and audiences like that. Beyond these 5 things, there's 100 other things there is not agreement. Half the world thinks you should list your hobbies on a resume, and half the world says that's crazy. Why would you ever do that? Half the world, or not half, but some people like short resumes, some like long resumes, some like this font, some like that font. So my point is, again, a lot of the things you're agonizing on your resume are not things that there's a right answer. You'll have to just go with your preference. But there are 5 things I'm going to walk you through here that really are pretty much considered, universal. So if your resume passes these 5 tests, it's already top 10% just by virtue of passing these 5 tests, in my opinion. Okay? So what's the first one? The first one is you need it to look good. Okay? So while there isn't a perfect resume format or just do it exactly like this, it's mainly about, with your layout, following a few good rules of thumb. So you don't want the font to be too big or too small. 11 to 12 points is pretty standard. If you're really packing a lot in, you could probably go down to 10 point, but those of us older folks like me might have to squint to read it. But 11 to 12 point is about the right font size, okay? And we're talking a conventional font, no weird font, so stick with something businessy like Cambria, Calibri, Times, Arial, the pretty much conventional ones, okay? You want to have at least a 1/2 inch top and bottom, 3/4 inch around. Most of the time you start with like 1 inch all around and only squeeze it tighter if you have to. But the point is, you don't want it like microfiche, if any of you know what that is. You don't want it all the way out to the border or so tight that it just isn't easy to read. Okay, now you'll hear a little dissent on this, but most readers like bullets. Most people want short 1-line, 2-line bullets. They can be mixed with some paragraphs. So you might have like a paragraph describing your job and then the bullets of your projects. But the point is, you don't want all paragraphs, everything just big blocky paragraphs. most people won't take the time to read through all that. And I'm going to show you examples of all this in just 1 second. Okay, 1 to 2 pages in length, unless you're a college professor. I mean, pretty much nobody wants to see more than 2 pages. And really the trend right now is towards 1 page. So I've even got senior executives sometimes that were packing their top stuff in 1 page and letting go of a bunch of old stuff or irrelevant stuff. I'm guessing, given the level of most of you, 1 page is probably the right length. But if you just can't fit everything you need to on 1 page, it's fine to go to 2 or 1.5, but the norm, the trend now is definitely towards shorter. Okay, you obviously want, this is kind of dumb, but you want your content in sections so they can scan it easily. Here's my education with the header. Here's my key skills. Here's my experience. So we'll see examples of that. And this is an interesting one. You don't want it to be, it's like Goldilocks. You don't want it too fancy. So you'll see resumes. The web is full of resumes and templates that are like a graphic designer did them. 3 columns with an infographic and a big color scheme and all this stuff. Some of them look terrible. Some of them look pretty cool. But even the cool looking ones, virtually every hiring person I talk to says, we don't like them. We're not hiring you to be a graphic designer. It's not going to scan well into our system. So if you have like 3 columns and graphics, it just won't scan into a resume system. So I there's exceptions, but generally I say keep it, have a little personality, a little pizzazz, as I'm going to show you, but not this over the top stuff, right? And at the same time, you don't want it too boring. You don't want just vanilla text on a page with no border lines, no color, no nothing. So sometimes it looks like someone just typed text on a page, or even some of the Microsoft Word templates are pretty overused now. So we're just kind of looking for something, not too boring, but not over the top flashy. Tables and columns in Microsoft Word don't tend to scan well. So I usually encourage people either to set your resume up not using tables or columns. If you do want sort of the column look, use tabs, use center tabs, right tabs. Those will be less prone to tripping up scanners. But if you just can't avoid using tables or columns, then what you'd want to do is save your document as a text-only file. So let's say you do a really pretty Word document. If you just go in Microsoft Word and do save as text, it'll take all that formatting out and just create a file of just text. That would be the resume one you would send to like a scanner or a robot system or something online, because it's not going to care about the format. It's going to suck in that text. But I try to kill 2 birds with 1 stone by just not using tables or columns, so I can use the one resume both for real people and for computer submissions. It kind of saves you that extra hassle. Okay, no photos or graphics unless you're in the design field or a model or an actor. It's in the US, you don't have photos on resumes. Many other countries of the world you do, but here companies are worried about being accused of discrimination, so they usually won't consider resumes with photos on them. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, Microsoft Word templates are a bit overused, so try to come up with something a little more original. So anyway, I just wanted you to have all that on a slide, so when you go back and work on your resume, you can review those and make sure you pass all those tests. But just to bring that to life and make it a little more interesting, let me jump here to show you some examples here. Oops, sorry, I must have accidentally deleted that shortcut. 1 second. Here's what I'm looking for. All right. So just show you a couple examples here of things. So what do we got going here? So here's a resume, format, 1 page. What are we looking at? Cambria 11 font, pretty standard stuff. And as you can see, what a lot of times, I break it into sections, and I like to have like a horizontal borderline between sections. You notice the font is small caps, not normal, and it's spaced out a little bit. So I'll usually just, change the font a little bit like that on the headers, so they stand out a little bit from the body text. But again, pretty clean. It's got these sections in there one at a time. Let me blow it up for you. I put a little page border around it and that little navy blue header just to give it that little bit of personality without going over the top, like I said, and having a big flashy color scheme. So that's one fairly traditional example I could pull up. What if I pulled up, I think this one's a little fancier. Okay, so this is the fanciest one I'm going to show you. This is, as you can see, it's got, I think, a little more modern, a little more involved with the, the different color blocks on the left side. It is set up in 2 columns, or tables, actually, tables with columns. So this would be an example of where I broke that rule. Because this client wanted this kind of modern look, I really didn't have much choice but to use a table. And we wanted to put in these sort of blocky visual elements on the right, calling out some of the skills and expertise. This is fine. I think it looks kind of cool, but again, this would not scan well because it's got those big blocks and it's in 2 columns. So for this client, or if any of you did something this fancy graphically, this is where, as I said a second ago, you'd want to do a save as in Word, okay, and change it from a Word document to a plain text document. So if I saved this as plain text, it's going to come back. And the funniest thing when you do that in Word, I don't know why, it doesn't change it on the screen initially. You have to then go open that document up, which of course I just saved, and who knows where it saved it. Let me try that one more time. So I'm going to save it as a plain text. Oh, there it is. I can open it. I think. No, that didn't do it either. Okay. So if I close Word and I open that, what you're going to see, I'll just save us some time here, is, let's get back to my computer's not behaving as well as normally here. Okay, so what we should see, I'm trying to fake it rather than, is a doc, okay, it'd take me too long to get there. But if I save that, reopened it, what you're going to see is all those graphics stripped out and just all the text, right? And then you would just kind of move the text around with paragraphs and stuff, and that you'd save that as a text file. And that's going to be the one that that you use when you're uploading it online and stuff like that. Okay, oh, here's what I was going to do. There we go. So what it's going to look like is something like this. So you see where this is just straight text, nothing in it. So the final step is you would just go in and just look at like, oh, it smushed that up. So you move these around a little bit, just kind of clean it up as best you can. Maybe put spaces between each of the sections, close any weird gaps. So you just tidy it up a little bit without any graphics, and then that becomes the one you would save and you send to the computer systems. Again, the only people are going to have to do that is if you use a multi-column or kind of fancy format, and most of mine are not that way, as I said. Okay, just to show you one last example, just pick one at random here. Okay, just another way you could do it. So this has a little colored header at the top. It's got these aren't columns, these are using tabs, center tab and right tab. But just to show you, another format that's different, but it still follows those rules I laid out, okay? So, like I said, there's a million ways to do it. There's lots of templates out on the web. You just want to generally abide by those formatting guidelines and you'll do okay. Not too fancy, not too boring, not longer than it needs to be, and you're pretty much good to go beyond there. I have seen some that are 5 pages long, 8-point font, and that certainly is not going to work in today's world. Okay, so again, if you have any questions on anything I'm covering, just unmute, ask them, or type it in the chat box, and I'll monitor it. I'm going to keep going here unless there's Q&A. So back to these slides. Second rule of thumb. I wish I could retire this one. You got to make sure it's perfect. No typos, no errors, no formatting inconsistencies. It's not that everything in the world always has to be perfect. We all make mistakes in emails and stuff. It's just that with resumes, the company's going to treat this as the highest quality of work you can produce. So if you still let sloppy errors in there, what are they supposed to think? Well, if they can't get this right, what are they going to write to a customer? What are they going to, what errors are they going to make on our website? So I just can't stress enough, even 20 years later after spell checkers were invented, I still see just as many typos as I did before, because spell checkers are not infallible. I can't tell you how many resumes say manger instead of manager, how many say the past tense of lead, like led a team. You got to take the A out of lead. Okay, so typos, don't trust your spell checker. It's not good enough, right? They're not foolproof. Have at least 3 people proofread your document. I'll throw the SU career team under the bus. I'm sure they'd be happy to do that for you if you ask them, right? But yeah, don't trust yourself because your eyes will put in whatever you think you wrote. So you got to get a few outside people to read it. Check your bullets. Did you put periods after them or not put periods after them? Whatever option you choose, do it consistently. Don't alternate. Oh, with these I put periods and these I didn't. I see that a lot. There's no right or wrong way to just, some people like the left justified text, some like certain sections centered. My only point there is be consistent, right? Don't have one job have, full justification all the way to the right edge, and then the next one is jagged right edge. Just check your justification. Same with indenting, be consistent about that. A very common thing, I think I've busted 3 people today on this. Most people won't catch it, but a lot of times the way you format your work dates, the hyphens, the spacing, the dashes are inconsistent, either because you added something to your resume from 2 years ago and you just didn't even pay attention, and this time used a small hyphen and last time you used a dash. Or whatever, Microsoft Word also auto format stuff. So sometimes you'll have your program will be set up where you type a small hyphen and Microsoft Word automatically corrects it to like a big dash. So just to avoid some stickler penalizing you, check how your dates are formatted. Okay, a couple more things. On resumes, for whatever reason, it is not very common to use pronouns. I, my, we, are. On LinkedIn, it is. People on LinkedIn will say, I do this, we did that, I shine in this area. But resumes, you typically keep that out. And you use what's called implied first-person perspective. It's not third-person perspective. Third person would be Mr. Youngquist does this, Mr. Dolce does this. For implied first person, like almost every resume you'll ever see, is instead of saying I led a team, you just say led a team because the reader knows it's you. So just make sure you didn't use any pronouns on your resume. Make sure your verb tenses, old jobs, you got to change them to ED. And then actually, shame on me. That's pretty much the same thing I already said. So make sure your writing perspective is consistent. So again, I know it's boring, but if I was reading a stack of resumes, remember, a lot of cases, they're trying to kick people out, not get people in. They've got more resumes than they need. They got 100 resumes. They're looking for any excuse to kick you out. So if you give them a sloppy typo, it makes it easy for them. Okay. So again, just go on your resume, check all those sections, make sure again, do I use periods after everything or not? Make sure the hyphens. So obviously my examples hopefully are good examples where there's not typos, but just for kicks and giggles, let me jump over to the internet real quick here. Got too many files open here. All right, so if I just go over the internet, and for example, I go to Indeed.com, the big job search site. I think Indeed.com is the best job advertising site out there, frankly. But what a lot of people don't know is you can go on Indeed, you can put a little / and you can type resumes after it. And that brings you to, Indeed has a database of millions of free resumes for employers to look at. You could also go to resumes.indeed.com. It's the same thing. But I was just going to show you, watch when I go to this big database of resumes and I type in something like manger, which again, there's not going to be many legitimate people with the word manger on their resume, a little wooden baby crib. But in this database, there's no fewer than, wait for it, 50,600 resumes with that typo on them, if you can believe it. So it just shows you, and look at this, we look at, probably is going to jump right off. Product, look at this poor person, produce manger, produce manger, produce manger, manger of, it just is such a common typo, and these poor people wonder why they may not get callbacks. I've even seen some funny ones like the untied states of America instead of United States. There's 18 people. This person was an untied states army contractor. So you get my point. You got to really proof these things and don't trust your own eyes. I wouldn't trust mine, even though I do this for a living. If I was working on a resume, I would assume I might have screwed something up and I just can't see it. Okay. All right, moving on from there, a little more sophisticated. That was some basic stuff. The next thing that a lot of people ask about is, do you need any kind of objective at the top of the resume or something like that? So the rule, as I would say, is a clear positioning. The job market is not that much different than the consumer market. It is about round pegs, round holes, being a solution to a problem. So just like if you went on Google or went in the yellow pages and said, I'm looking for a plumber out in Issaquah, or I'm looking for a, whatever it might be, a interior decorating service in Bellevue. A resume that doesn't have any indication of what someone wants to do for a living is not going to work very well, because the days of a one size fits all, here's my education, here's my experience, you figure out what I could do for you, that just doesn't fly anymore. You got to take more ownership of what you're an expert in and what you want to do for a living. So how you do it, you don't want to say objective at the top, because for years people did that and they were so bad, most of them. Some of the SU staff may remember the days where people would say objective, seeking a challenging, rewarding job at a growing company where I can utilize my skills and education. And you can tell it just, that's laughable. It's like, well, as opposed to what? A job that doesn't use your skills and is a dead-end company? I mean, they just never said anything. They were so empty. So the word objective now kind of has a bad vibe in the hiring scene. So don't say objective. What you do instead is just put like a headline, just a centered or big bold statement at the top that just indicates in a couple words what type of job you're after. So you can see here in the examples, someone might say entry-level accounting and finance, or we could add professional on the end of that. We could say project manager dash and be more specific, because project managers, every industry has different types. So we could say environmental engineering. If you're an undergrad or looking for an internship, you could say like junior software engineer, and even say like dash seeking internship. On and on and on. Sales assistant, you could say junior software programmer. But see, if you put that on there, that reader instantly goes, bang, okay, I get what I'm looking at here. Now, what you're probably wondering is, what if you're not sure what you want to do? Or what if you're thinking about 3 different directions? Just have different resumes. Have one that's calibrated towards business analyst / data analyst, have another one that says marketing program assistant, and maybe have another one that says administrative assistant or something. So just create slightly different versions to appeal to your slightly different audiences. Okay. And then if you did have a certain industry you were targeting, you could put that in the headline or put it underneath as a tagline. You could say like business analyst, and underneath say focused on or specializing in computer software, cloud, and information technology companies. Or you could say sales assistant, focused on consumer goods and retail companies. But see, the point is, the more specific you can be about what you want to do, you will look more like a round peg if that's what the round hole is you're trying to fill for that company. And just change it as needed, customize it as needed. I'll show you examples in just a second. Okay, and then very last, on this subject of starting the resume with a strong focus and positioning, most people, not all, but many people put a summary in there, just a little 2, 3, 4, 5-line paragraph that just talks a little bit about their passion, their background, what's important about them. Yeah, some readers may skip that, but I think it's a nice chance to kind of brand yourself and put a little personality in there, okay? So if we take all these bullet points and translate them into real life, let's take a look here. So if I go back to this one, for example, this woman just comes right out and says, what are you? Oh, she's a product manager and UX specialist. Great. Now I know exactly what she does. In fact, she could even have 2 resumes, one for each of those, but we decided to kind of combine these in this particular case. Right under there, we stuck in a little tagline, passionate about BI, data science, and data visualization. So if she was applying to a company that doesn't do those things, we either just get rid of that tagline or change it to whatever that other company does, right? But as you can see, it's helping the reader not only understand that why you fit the job, but it's hard to, it also sort of intangibly communicates, you know what you want to be when you grow up. You're not one of these lost souls that just, is just looking for a job and you don't care what it is. You want to show, I'm proud of what I do and I've got a real focus going forward, because companies are looking for that. They're looking for people who know what they want to do and are building towards something, and this kind of helps. And then, like I said, this is a short one, but just a little summation: BS in computer science, passionate about the exploding arena of data science, and just kind of getting to the gist of what she does. Okay, so that's just one option. Let me show you another one here. Let's go back over here. Let's grab this one. Okay, so here's someone looking to get into human resources. So once again, we've got a title that immediately kind of says what job, what level. We say some nice things. We even say young professional, just to, doesn't have a lot of experience, entry level. Talks about her supervisors, things they've said about her. Okay, just a short little starting thing that just doesn't take much room, but it just gives you kind of a target. So I'm a big fan of that. One more. I think we have time. Let me pull up. Let's pull up one more here. Okay. Here's somebody who's looking to get into operations, but in this particular case, this person was really focused on restaurants and hospitality. Wouldn't be the industry I would choose right now, just because COVID has clobbered it, but you get the point. It's not just a generic operations person. This person is just screaming from the rafters, are you a hospitality and restaurant company? If so, I want to work for you. That is the field I'm most interested in. And then yet again, we tried to just say a few nice things, summing up, here's what their background is, and get creative and stuff like that. Okay, so that was rule number 3. I'm going to pause for a second just because I've been rambling on here. Can I ask the SU staff, do you have any comments on any of that, either supporting it or disagreeing, or just things I missed on what I've covered so far?
Honestly, I would agree with everything you've said. It's the same stuff I always talk about when I'm meeting with students on resumes. And I was just chatting with Megan too, and she was saying it was really nice to get some feedback that we're talking about the right things.
Yeah, like I said, I think people think resumes, there's this brand new trick that you need to do. It hasn't changed in years and years. I mean, the fundamentals have really not changed. So yeah, it sounds like we're preaching from the same choir book. Megan and Mary Lou, same thing?
I think the thing that I would chime in, Matt, is when I'm thinking about an undergrad student in particular, and maybe you'll address this, but at what point do they have their education above their experience?
Mm-hmm. Oh, good point. Yeah.
And especially for our juniors or sophomores who are just starting to launch.
Yeah.
But yes, I do totally agree
with most of that. Yeah, great point. I forgot to mention. So there's not a right answer on that, but I would say if your strongest credential is your education versus experience, put education up top, right under the summary or whatever. If you have a good chunk of relevant work experience, I'd put education at the bottom. That's where it normally is. But if you have a one-page resume, I personally don't think it matters much. I think they're going to see it no matter where you put it on a one-page resume. But yeah, for many of us that just had a lot of schooling and not a lot of experience, I would lead with education, which maybe some of these examples don't show that. But yeah, great.
No.
Hi. Oh, hello. I have a question or a comment. So you just said that like they're gonna be picking out like the hot spots. I feel like there's a whole bunch of words showing here. Like there's a whole paragraph about them. I feel as though this person could have easily said that in like 2 sentences. Like I look at this and I get immediately overwhelmed and well, I'm not a resume. Obviously I'm not a person that looks at resumes, but I just feel like this is a lot of words. So
the funny thing about that
confused.
is how much that's changed. Like, in the old days, this would have been considered short and sweet. And so I think I don't know if it's the digital impact or whatever, but your reaction might be more in keeping with a younger generation of hiring managers might agree. It doesn't invalidate what I said earlier, though, because I didn't say the only thing that counted were those hot spots. It just means they're going to look at those first and go, okay, before I waste time reading anything else, what is their education? What is this? Most recruiters and people would then go back and look at some of this. And again, what I'm really trying to avoid, and you can certainly disagree, is in most of my summaries, I'm not trying to just have a bunch of cliches of like results-oriented team player. I'm trying to give some sense of personality and passion, which usually doesn't show up elsewhere on the resume. So some managers may not care and may skip it. Others might look at that, and like I said, once they check the hot spots, they go back and they pick up a few interesting things. And last but not least, segueing to my next point, keywords matter. So if you had a resume that was so short and sweet on words, you might please managers a little more, but you're going to lose the keyword battle in scanners, because scanners, they eat language. They look for language. So I've seen some that are just too cut to the chase, right? But like I said, it's a subjective issue. I'm showing what I think on balance works best, but if your preference is for shorter, go shorter. You don't even necessarily need a summary if you don't want one.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, Matt, back like when I was you know, back in my recruiting days when I was looking at tons and tons of resumes on a daily basis, kind of what you said is what I would do. My eyes initially went to sort of the quick, easy sort of data points to pick out, like the bullet points, where you worked, how long you worked there, what your job title was, what your degree was. And then I would go back and start looking at some of the more wordy or paragraph parts to try to get a better sense of like who this person was and if there was anything that they wanted me to know about them that wasn't in their bullet pointed sections.
Yeah. And it's almost like cover letters. I would say 60% of recruiters don't even read them anymore. I don't have time and whatever. That's the big companies. Little companies go, they're invaluable. If I don't get a cover letter, I won't consider you. So it's things like that there's a polarized audience, you know, and a lot does depend on the size of the company. So yeah, it's just one of those things. It's a best practice, but you can adapt it. Again, a lot of resume, it's you ultimately are the most important customer for your resume. So I tell people, you know, the world disagrees about a lot of this. You need a document you feel good about. So whoever chimed in with that question, no problem. Just put enough text that you're comfortable with it. Others may go a little farther, but yeah, it's a moving target.
Matt, there's a question in the chat, kind of a semantics.
Yeah.
Is it appropriate to describe current role in present tense and previous experience in past tense?
Yeah, so the tense should be whatever the truth is. So exactly that, just like you see on the screen here. If you're doing the job now, it should be present. I do this, I do that, I do this other thing. And then the past ones are past tense. I have seen people do things like put everything in ing tense, which I always think is weird, but I've seen people, you know, managing a team and even old jobs, you know, leading projects. And it sort of dodges the question, but I don't like that personally. I would go with present for present, past for past. And I think that's the most conventional.
Hey, Matt.
Oh, sorry, Justin, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Very similar question. I was actually just talking to a student about this the other day, so I'd be interested to get your take on it. What about in a situation where they're working their current job, and some projects they're currently working on, but other ones they've completed and not doing anymore? Should they do like present and past in the same?
Yeah, those always trip people up, but and there is no elegant solution to it. Again, I would go with the truth, which is like, let's say this job had 3 bullets in it, 2 things about responsibilities you're doing now, and 1 about a project you completed, you know, 6 months ago. I would make the past one past. Right? So one verb says, you know, successfully accomplish X, but the others say currently doing or leading. Yeah, again, I would stick with what's the truth, past or present. And I've seen people try to get around that, but I would just stick with the easy way to do it.
That's what I said too. Thanks.
All right. Good questions, everyone.
Hey, Matt, you know, I work with a lot of students, undergrads that are sophomore, junior. If they want a summary at the top, but they're not quite sure yet what kind of position they're pursuing, do you have ever preferred what you call that section? I usually suggest professional summary, professional profile.
Yeah, I don't think head or matter. I don't think anyone's going to argue summary versus profile. Sometimes you don't even, on a lot of mine, I don't even call it anything. I just have like the headline, and then under it is a paragraph. Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to fight you on the headline. And again, if you're starting out and don't have a lot of experience, it might be you have to talk more about your personality traits because you don't have a lot of hardcore skills yet. So you might say, like on one of these, I said, you know, recognized by professors, or, you know, or pride myself on reliability, coachability, and willing to do whatever it takes. I mean, if we have to work from those kind of personal qualities at your age, then you do it. But yeah, it just... The more skills you get, you would make it more tangible about actual skills. Yeah.
Great.
Okay, great. Great comments. Let's press on.
Can I ask
another one
real quick?
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for doing this. I just wanted to ask a quick question regarding, I remember you talked earlier about the resumes and how the hiring managers, they'll look at, like you said, it'll take about 6 seconds, look for the hot spots.
Yeah.
I want to ask about inserting certain things into your resume. I know you said you want to, you know, calibrate it and make it custom to a specific job, especially if you're applying the multiples within one company.
Mm-hmm.
How important is it to say meet the technological profile of, like, you know, if they say they use a program that scans out people that have only these words,
Yeah.
and they don't even get to a person for that 6 seconds. How important is it to take the comments on the job posting, or not the comments, the the
Keywords.
language, the vocabulary, right? How important is that to maybe work into your resume somehow, just to get past the first stage? And can you give a little bit of insight on maybe how much of a myth or a fallacy, or how true all that is?
Oh, it's absolutely true. And in fact, it's like I planted you, because that's my exact next slide. Nice job, Julie. Yeah, good segue. Okay, so I remember I said there's 5 key rules. We're only through 3 of them. So the 4th one, exactly what you just said, and it's an important one, is you've got to have all the right keywords, because almost any resume, it's not even just the big companies that pay for what are called ATS systems, applicant tracking systems, that parse up, but even mid-sized companies, what you don't realize is when you run an ad on a site like monster.com or ZipRecruiter, or all these places companies advertise, they do the same thing. They feed the recruiter back, or the company, a ranked list of resumes based on keyword sorting, right? So about the only places this wouldn't matter as much would be a mom and pop or really small company that is just taking resumes by hand kind of thing. But yeah, keywords for right or wrong are huge. And this is one of the biggest chronic problems of resumes. Do I have it in the slides? I'm trying to think. So I'll just say right now, the 2 reasons most people miss keywords and their resume doesn't do marketing for 20 years. Do I really have to say I do marketing plans and marketing strategy and I know about digital advertising? And yes, you do. If I'm a sales guy, do I really have to say I do negotiating and client management? Isn't that assumed? Not by a robot, it's not. So you really do have to get the language in. And then the second reason people miss keywords is the words keep changing, right? 5 years ago, you were a recruiter. Now, the new sexy word is talent acquisition. 10 years ago, you did process improvement. Now, apparently, everyone and their brother calls it digital transformation. So the words change. And if you don't keep up with the words and have them on there, it just increases the risk you get left behind. So you really want to make sure you've got the keywords. And here's my tips on that. So for starters, on almost all the resumes I've shown you, I put a section near the top. Again, you can call it key skills, areas of expertise, competencies, whatever. But I try to focus on the 10 or 15 most important keywords I don't want them to miss. Okay, we'll go back and look in just a second. Okay, as I just said, don't make assumptions. Okay, if it's a word you see again and again and again in advertisement, it means companies want to find it and they're likely going to be scanning for it. So put it in there. We're not talking about keywords like this, like soft, squishy stuff like dynamic, team player, results-oriented. Those soft skills, as they're called, like I said, it's fine to put some of those if you don't have any harder, more concrete skills, but that's not usually the kind of language recruiters are going to look for because it's self-reported, right? I mean, raise your hand if you're not results-oriented on this call, or creative, or a good communicator, or whatever the case may be. My point is that, yeah, companies, that goes in one ear and out the other because my system just, can you, hold on one second. Can you still hear me, Justin? Okay, my screen just changed. I didn't touch anything. All right, just making sure. So that's not the stuff we're talking about. We're talking about concrete skills. Okay, a tip I give a lot of people that have got recent or currently education is your education is usually full of juicy keywords. Jumping over my screen, for some reason my slides are not, I can't see you and my slides at the same time. Oh, I think it's, hold on one second. Zoom usually behaves better than this. One second. Bear with me. Okay, let's go back to where I was here. All right, can you see? Okay, hopefully you can see that now. Okay, so what I was saying there is if you've got recent education or in education, a lot of times there's some awesome keywords in your class names and what you study, make sure you put that on your resume. Under your degree or whatever, say, you know, key coursework includes financial planning, legal compliance, you know, whatever, digital marketing, SEO. I see so many students that don't do that, and I just think they miss the chance to get a bunch of really good keywords in there. Okay, and then acronyms, unless it's an incredibly common acronym, MBA or BA degree, when in doubt, spell it out. So like, and kind of know your audience, but I'm trying to think of an example. I'll see people put, you know, PPC campaigns or something. And, you know, anyone who's in web marketing knows what that is. But if you're not in web marketing, you're just an HR person or recruiter, you may not know that means pay-per-click. So just be a little conscious of your acronyms and think about at least spelling them out once somewhere on there. Okay. So I think we're all in agreement. Keywords are important, but they're so important. Like I said, here's just on all of these resumes I showed you, there was somewhere on there. So like over here, we've got an expertise section where we hit like 8 or 12 keywords. Let's grab another one. This one, I called it skills, strengths, qualification, got 12 of those keywords in there. And the other nice thing about having a dedicated section for this is you can customize it so easily. So when you're applying to an ad, it's like plug and play. Oh, these guys didn't say anything about order processing, kick that out, but they asked for Microsoft Excel pivot tables, stick that in there. So it just allows you very quickly to match up the language with what the employer wants. So Julius, yeah, everything you were saying, this is an important thing you do. And to take that a little farther, back to my slides, I'm just going to skip ahead. Here are it's easy for me to say, don't miss any keywords, but people always respond and say, well, how do I know how do I find those keywords? What is the right language to be using? So here's a list of 5 sources you can use to just be really thorough on that. Number one, it's obvious, but study job ads. Whatever you're seeing in job advertisements, put it in there. 4 out of 5 business analyst jobs ask for Tableau software or ask for Monte Carlo simulations. You'd better have it in there if you've done it. The second thing, as I showed you earlier, you can go to Indeed.com/resumes and look at millions of samples. So you might look up whatever you do for a living, again, a business analyst, and look at 20 of those resumes. Some will be terrible, but my point is just look for language you missed. Oh, 7 of these people put in data warehousing, and I somehow forgot to say that. So your peers, you can borrow from them and get stuff there. Same thing on LinkedIn. You could just as easily look up LinkedIn profiles of people similar to you or who do what you want to do. Just look for the ones that rank high and look at the terminology they throw in there. Okay. Number 4, if you're serious about your career, I know this may sound old school, you should be reading stuff. You should be reading blogs in it. You should be reading trade journals. You should be checking out websites. You should be, your studies might kind of count for this now, but you should be trafficking in the literature of that field. Just like even after all my years in career coaching, I've got a whole bunch of stuff, blogs I read, just looking for what's new, what am I missing, what's that stupid new term that has come out. So that's another way. Anytime you're reading literature in your field and you don't recognize a word, Google it and go, what is it? And it might just be a silly name for something you already do, or it might be a new concept you want to learn about. But then the 5th method, which is, how do I say this? It's the most sexy. I don't think it's as effective as a lot of people want you to think, especially the creators of these sites. But for those who may not know about these, there are sites now that do this for you, where you upload your resume, right? Like the most famous one is JobScan, the top one I've got there, which is a Seattle company. You upload your resume and then you upload or paste in the job description you're targeting, and it takes 2 seconds and it says, oh, here's all the words you missed that were in the job description and not on your resume. And you just go down the list, pick out the ones you've got and stick them in there. So JobScan is the most famous. There's another one called Resonate, kind of does the same thing. And there's actually dozens of these. I would say these are the top 3. Carmen.co is another one. We don't have time for me to demo them, unfortunately, but you're all good with computers, I suspect. So yeah, you might check out those 3 sites. They all offer some free amount of doing that. Now, eventually, if you use it a lot, they're going to ask you to subscribe or pay a fee, and you can decide whether or not that's worth it to you. But even if, like on JobScan, you use their 5 free scans, you will pick up 95% of the keywords you missed, because those 5 ads are going to be enough data for it to tell you, here's 7 words you missed. So as a final check, and it's kind of interesting to see how they work, just go to those 3 sites, run your resume through there with the types of jobs you want to get. And I'd be shocked if some of you didn't go, how did I miss that word? I've done that for years or whatever. So lots of ways here. You just got to be conscious of how important keywords are and make sure you get them. Okay, 5th and final thing of the 5, and then I've got a few last minute thoughts. The 5th thing everyone agrees on pretty much is, to the extent you can, your resume needs to have specific accomplishments. Don't just tell me you did a job. Everyone did a job. I need to know if you're any good at it. Were you the best in the office? Did you get things done? Did you have an impact? So a lot of resumes just drone on about managed a team. And the reader doesn't know, Justin didn't know when he was recruiting, is it a half-time intern or 20 cross-functional project managers? Improved efficiency. Did you save 10 cents a month by recycling a staple, or did you negotiate with a vendor and save 20% of costs or whatever? So you got to show them not that you did a job, but to the extent you can, you did a good job or a great job. And I know it seems hard, especially if you've had lower level jobs, but accomplishments are, at the end of the day, about the only thing that's going to separate you from your competitors. Because outside of goofy people who apply for jobs they don't have background in, every financial analyst applying for a financial analyst job does Excel, is good at math. You're not going to win any brownie points for that. So you got to dig deep and figure out, what can I add? Are there numbers? How many things did you do? What was the timeline? Was there some result, a percentage, a dollar figure? Was there an award you got for it? Recognition, anything like that. I've even had people, you don't see it much, but that might even put like little testimonials, like, developed a pivot table that my boss said, was instrumental to pricing the company product properly, or whatever it is. So going fast here, but this next slide, since you're all going to have, if you wanted a recording or a copy of these slides, these are the kinds of things that can really toughen up your accomplishments. And even if you don't think I've had like much impact, I haven't made millions of dollars, just think about timelines. I worked in a busy office of 17 people. I worked with 12 key clients. Almost everyone, when they put their mind to it, can find some way to add that to their resume. Most people haven't thought enough about it, okay? Now, I did notice some of the chat questions. Let me catch up on those. If you're switching jobs or industries, all I can tell you on that is, to the extent you can shift your language and the headline to that industry you want to get into, you got to push that as far as you can without doing something ridiculous you can't defend, right? If it is a massive change, like if you're going from being a lawyer to now going back and being a computer programmer, I think you've got to say that in your summary. I think you've got to say, experienced attorney pursuing a career pivot into the, what did I say it was, software programming field, drawing upon strengths. And I mean, you got to just come out and tell them, I am a very untraditional candidate and here's what I'm trying to do. But for most minor shifts, like if you're a software programmer who wants to get into project management, that's not like a massive career shift. So you would just change your resume to have a version, technical project management, stress the skills that you've studied or certifications. And the last thing that I think all the SU people would agree is, the farther away you go away from the jobs you've done in the past, the more networking has to be part of it. Because your resume is not going to win against 20 people who have already done the job you want for years. It's going to take a person vouching for you. It's going to take being more aggressive about reaching out to companies cold instead of waiting for them to advertise. It just goes with the territory. So there's a certain amount of resume trickery you can use, or skewing it, but at some point you just got to embrace, you're not going to get a job you haven't done before off an ad. You're going to have to use connections and network. It's like marketing. It would be like if I didn't do career coaching and I wanted to get into landscaping, it's not going to happen overnight. Okay, what else do we got here? We answer a couple of these. I know we're short on time. Yes, it's all recorded. References are not mentioned anymore on resumes. I've got a few final slides I don't think we're going to have time for. So in the recording and the slides you're going to read, I'll leave you to those. So yeah, references are not mentioned on resumes anymore. You would just provide those if and when the company asks for them. That was an old convention that's now pretty much gone, at least from what I've seen.
Hey, Matt, there was an earlier
Yeah.
question around whether it's a good idea to link to portfolios or projects.
I think I do have this on one of those extra slides. Yeah, right. It was the last bullet I had. So if you have online projects, content, anything like that, yes, I would embed a link in your resume to it. Just like on LinkedIn, I would have links to it in the appropriate place. The only thing I would say about that is I see a lot of people do that just to do it. And the work product they're showing is not very impressive. So like I have people, 5 years ago, I did a writing sample for high school that they've just put on there just to put it on there. And I look at it and say, but that's not very good because that was high school and you're now much better at this. Or here's something totally irrelevant. I worked on a program to fund refugees, but now they're looking for a business analyst job at Microsoft. So just be careful. I think it's better to leave it in the imagination unless you're convinced or other people validate, yes, this is impressive and will help you be marketable to this job. It's not just quantity for quantity's sake, if that makes sense. Okay. Did I get all of them? Anything I missed? I think we talked about that one. Projects. Oh, correct wording to refer to language skills. I would just near the bottom say language skills. Something like bilingual English and Spanish, or language skills, English and Spanish fluent, German intermediate. So just like one liner that puts that in. If it's really important to your career, you might put it in the summary, just mentioned in that opening paragraph, bilingual business major with. So yeah, that's a good skill to have for sure.
Matt?
Yeah.
Something I'm seeing or hearing for more from people is wanting to see some hobbies and interests just so they can talk about something interesting in the interview and so I actually used to say to students only include what was relevant, but I've kind of shifted a little bit from that. Are you seeing that more too?
Yeah, that's one of those things on this slide you'll have, which is called everything else is a judgment call. Meaning, like I said, I think there's 5 key rules, and everything else I could line up a jury of 10 people who would say, you have a hobby on your resume? What do you think this is, playground? What do I care what you do outside of work? And I could line up 10 who say, oh, you scuba dive. Where are you now? You're Patty. Where do you do that? And I've had people get jobs based off hobbies. They talk for 15 minutes about bird watching, and then they're like, oh, by the way, do you do any accounting? Okay, you're hired. So you're not going to get consensus on these things on this slide. This is where you have to just trust your own preferences. And like I said, I could argue each side of that, but there's just so much like this, it's not a right answer.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Someone asked about leveraging your contacts. Unfortunately, we don't have time, and that's a non-resume question, which is so important about networking. I'm sure that the Seattle U staff can tell you more about that because that's a whole different ball of wax. Volunteer work, I would put volunteer work, community service down at the bottom. If you have a lot of other stuff, just make it short and sweet. Volunteer at Big Brothers Big Sisters. If you don't have much work experience, pump it up more. Talk for a few lines about what you did in your volunteer jobs. Okay. Did I get them all? Okay, so we're right on schedule. I need to be conscious of your time. Justin, you think that's a good stopping point?
Works for me. I think that's awesome, Matt. Really appreciate all the advice you shared today.
Well, my pleasure. Like I said, I'll send you a copy of the slides, Justin, if you can distribute them. You've got the recording. And my final thought I will say is the one I started with. Yes, this stuff is important, but it is way down the list compared to networking, outreach, getting that brochure in lots of different hands and not sitting in your computer trying to perfect it for the next 3 months. That is usually an avoidance mechanism I see people fall prey to. So follow this advice, but try to get a piece and then just move on from there. Don't get stuck on it.
I would definitely echo that. And I put a link to Matt's blog on his Career Horizons website in the group chat. Definitely check it out. He has some awesome advice in there. So I think it's definitely well worth a read of his blog. He's got some really, really good stuff.
Appreciate that. Okay. Well, thanks everyone. Have a great day. Megan, Mary Lou, good to see you. And
Thanks, Matt. Good to see you.
good luck. COVID will pass eventually and the market will get back to normal, but it is getting better. I have seen it getting better on my end.
Ooh, good news.
Good.
All right.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
very much.